Good evening, all of you. A warm welcome to you all on day 7 of the 7-day faculty development program on literary theory. Today we have with us Dr. U. Sumati, Associate Professor and Head, Department of English, Government Arts College, Coimbatore. So, as our HOD remarked a moment earlier, our association with ma'am has been a very, very long one. She has visited our campus umpteen number of times in several capacities, mostly as speaker in seminars and conferences. So, personally, I would like to say that I am very privileged and proud to introduce myself as a student of ma'am. So, if you would let me, I would go on for hours talking about ma'am, her virtues as a person and as a teacher. But then, to put it in a nutshell, I would like to say that ma'am, as an individual, she is a perfectionist. So, be it something very insignificant or something of great value, I have seen her treat everything with equal gravity. So, as students, we have learned so much from her, and this is the first lesson that we have learned from ma'am. And she is such an even handed person and an impartial teacher. So, any student who reaches out to her, ma'am will usually go a long way to help them out. So, I remember how, as a student, when I was in my PG, I wrote my amateurish seminar paper then, and I handed it over to ma'am to get her opinion. So that was way back when I hardly even knew about MLA formatting. And I remember very next day, ma'am gave me back my paper, and she gave a paper on my paper telling what I should write, what I should not write, and how I should do the formatting. I still retain all those pages, and not just me. Any student of ma'am would vouch to what extent ma'am would go to help them out. She is like this beacon. It's almost been 15 years since I have left the college, but I have always been in constant touch with ma'am. Whenever I want something, I will always reach out to her, and she is one person on whom I can always bank on. So today she is going to talk on eco-criticism, but I know that she is not only a person who knows eco-critical theory, but she also practices several of its facets. When we were students, she has taken us out on eco walks and eco tours. All those are unforgettable moments. So I'm very happy that ma'am has accepted our invitation today and is here to be a part of this program. Ma'am heads a very big department, and she also has other huge responsibilities awaiting her. But then, in spite of all that, she has made time for us today. So thank you, ma'am, ever so much. And ma'am, and ma'am has decided to speak on eco-criticism today, and we all know how it is the burning need of the moment. We have seen so many theories so far, but then this one particular theory is so much connected to life, especially at this moment when the world has already progressed, or should I say retrogressed towards the sixth mass level extinction. uh, there are people who are telling that we have to fight on war footing to somehow manage and come out of such a predicament. We have this Paris agreement, climate agreement, which is also insisting that the world leaders take measures. Because if you see the earlier five mass level extinctions, it was not man made, it was natural. It was either because of a tsunami or because a meteor had hit Earth. But this mass level extinction has been accelerated by man. So, as such, many rare species have already become extinct, and we don't know where the world is progressing. And if we do not take enough action, the future of us and our children, it is going to be pretty bad. And eco-critical theory, in this sense, it is highly relevant. Why? Because when we read a literary text, we immediately get to understand how we are treating nature. And we also get to know what we are supposed to do. These theories help us understand our predicament better. So, along with all of you, I'm very curious to know ma'am's take on eco criticism. Welcome once again, ma'am. But before we listen to ma'am, I would just like to call upon Miss Anuradha, Assistant Professor from the Department of English, to deliver a formal welcome address and to introduce the chief guest of the day.
A warm good morning to one and all present here. I'm too delighted and happy to welcome the gathering through the virtual mode of last 7th day of Faculty Development Program organized by Department of English, PSG Krishnamali College for Women, Coimbatore. I'm pleased to welcome the outstanding delegates of our institution, Dr. Nandini Chairperson, Dr. N. Yashoda Devi Secretary, Dr. S. Nirmala Principal, and Dr. Batmavati Dean and Alumni Relationship, and Dr. Sushil Mary Matthews, Associate Professor and Head Department of English, PSG Krishnamali College for Women, to cheer up and support this faculty development program event. We are too energetic to welcome our chief guest, Dr. U. Sumati Ma'am, Associate and Head Department of English, Government Arts College, Coimbatore, to enhance and share her experiential wisdom on the topic of ecocriticism. To state Dr. U. Sumati Ma'am's profile updation, she had crossed 26 years of experience in imparting English literature as a core content, and she had published books entitled Book number 1, Ecocriticism in Practice, Book number 2, Vaishnava Ecology, and published papers around 25 numbers, and presented papers, international conference, 3 numbers, and attended 35 national conference and presented papers. In research guidance, 6 PhD and 15 MPhil had been awarded and qualified under guidance. As a dynamic personality, U. Sumati Ma'am had completed minor major project entitled The Role of Ecocriticism in Creating Environment Awareness in the Academic 2009, and the grand success of a major project entitled Environmental Relevance of Vaishnavism in the Academic Year 2030. I welcome you, ma'am, once again to share your expertise, knowledge with us. I welcome the faculty colleagues, both aided and SF, and outstanding and enthusiastic other institution participants to be benefited through this program. I welcome a staff coordinator, Mr. Madhangi, Literary Debating Association, Department of English, PSG at Krishnamali College for Women, to comment this program in a memorable way. Once again, I welcome you all for this faculty development program event.
Over to you, ma'am.
Yes, Madangi, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. I'm very glad to be a part of this. I'm very glad indeed to be a part of this 7-day FDP program organized by PSG Krishnamali College for Women. And I thank the management, the principal, the head of the department, Dr. Sushil, the faculty members, and the coordinator of the program, Dr. Madhangi, for having given me this opportunity. And the college, the department, the staff members, they are quite close to my heart. I have been there, as Dr. Madhangi pointed out, on many occasions. And I always have felt at home in that campus. I'm very glad that this opportunity is given to me. And I wish to share my little knowledge on ecocriticism in this series related to literary theory. I wish to share my PPT now. Dr. Madhangi, hope my audio is clear.
It is clear, ma'am.
Okay. Is my PPT visible and is it clear?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible, ma'am.
Yes, shall I go on then?
Yes, ma'am, please proceed, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Madhangi. Yes, so today I wish to speak on deep ecology, and I have titled my presentation as Deep Ecology, the confluence of nature and culture. And I take it as a given that all of us know about eco-criticism, and I don't want to give much of a definition, and because I understand that we have come to a stage when eco-criticism is practiced and it is studied. So I don't think there is a necessity. One second. Yeah. So I take it as a given that all of us know about eco-criticism. So I don't want to give the obvious definition and all that. All of us know that it is earth-centered approach to literary studies, and it studies the relationship. Eco-criticism studies the relationship between literature and environment. Now I wish all of you to recall the introductory essay written by Cheryl Blotfelty in her book Eco-Criticism Reader, where she traces the growth of eco-criticism, and she talks about the three different phases in the growth of eco-criticism. And in the third phase, she points out how eco-criticism has branched out to very many specialized fields or sub areas, you can say. So she mentions deep ecology, she mentions ecofeminism, and there are so many areas. Eco-criticism has become an umbrella term, and it kind of encompasses everything. So we have climate change studies, we have environmental justice studies, social justice studies, everything coming under eco-criticism in the recent times. So today, I wish to talk about deep ecology, and because deep ecology believes in the preservation of nature as well as culture. These are two aspects of the same coin, two sides of the same coin, and we cannot make clear-cut demarcations between nature and culture. Both are necessary for our everyday life. So I wish to speak about deep ecology today. And so when we look at the term deep ecology, then we must understand that there is something called shallow ecology. So what is the difference between deep ecology and shallow ecology? In shallow ecology, it is very utilitarian in nature. So some of the people, they profess themselves as supporters of the environment. They practice some environmental habits, for example, planting trees and all that. But I'm giving a very simple example for shallow ecology. If I go on to plant trees that will help me, for example, coconut trees, because it will help me, I will gain something out of it. Okay, so then I'm looking at the utilitarian aspect of nature. So in that way, it can be called as shallow ecology. And for example, another example is that when you talk about recycling waste, then how we can recycle waste, then that comes under shallow ecology. But when you talk about cutting down waste, then that is deep ecology. So when you plant trees that may not be useful to you directly, which may not give you any economic or materialistic benefits, then you are practicing deep ecology. So this is shallow ecology is obviously short term. It is not going to help us in the long run, whereas deep ecology has got long range benefits. So as I told you, shallow ecology is very practical, pragmatic, whereas deep ecology believes in deep questioning, deep thoughts, deep meditation, and deep formulation of ideas. So shallow ecology aims at reforming, bringing about some reforms that may be temporary, or for the time being, it may be useful. Okay, it talks about pollution, it talks about resource depletion and all that. But if we look at it, basically, it is still man-centric, that is anthropocentric. Okay, it looks at how environment will be beneficial to man. So our focus is not on shallow ecology today. We are focusing on deep ecology, so which is going to realign man's thoughts. The concepts and ideas presented by science and logic will not, in the long run, shape our values, will not change the way we look at life or lead our lives. So for that, we need ecological wisdom. So that ecological wisdom can be gained from deep ecology. So when we practice deep ecology, we become biocentric. Okay, so we are not anthropocentric anymore. We become biocentric. So we have to credit Anne Naess, the Norwegian philosopher, mountaineer, and he was a professor also. He was the one who coined the term deep ecology. And he was staying in a cabin, okay, in a mountain cabin in a place called Tavagestin in Norway, and he stayed there for 10 years. So he spent his time climbing the mountains. He spent his time contemplating, thinking, and writing. And as a result, he came up with this concept called as, this philosophy called as deep ecology. And it is very interesting to note that he was a follower of Gandhiji, and he believed in the non-violent concepts um, practiced by Mahatma Gandhi. And as I told you, he believed in the need for ecological wisdom, not just practicing ecological principles, but knowing better, okay, changing our ethical values. So changing our way of lives, changing the way we look at nature. So that is what he meant by ecological wisdom. And how can one do that? One can do that by looking at environment as a part of oneself. Okay, if we look at nature as an extension of ourselves, then we will not harm it. And if we see ourselves as an extension of nature, then also we will not harm it. So it is this realization that he aims at. Okay, he makes a distinction between two types of selves. One is the solitary self. If man thinks that he's alone and he can do everything all by himself, then that results in egocentrism. Whereas if man understands the interconnectedness of all beings, then he moves towards biocentrism, and he is actually realizing the ecological self that is present everywhere, that is immanent everywhere. So that is what he is aiming at. And uh, Anne Naess developed certain principles, okay, the 8 platform principles. And he was very particular that all those who follow this platform principles will be practitioners of deep ecology. And he believed in following these norms or postulates. He called them as principles, norms, or postulates. Okay, and after that, he gives everybody the freedom to evolve our own philosophy. So the word Ecosofi is actually an acronym for ecological philosophy. So just as Sophia means wisdom, the word Sophia in philosophy means wisdom. So Ecosofi means ecological wisdom. So the first let us understand these 8 platform principles, and most of the presentation of mine is going to be based on these platform principles. So first he talks about the intrinsic value of life, and each creature has its own right to stay in this world. So it has its own right to exist. So that is whether it is useful to man or not, irrespective of its utilitarian value, every creature has got a right to exist. That is principle number 1. Number 2 is that this planet is rich and it has got diverse life forms, and man does not have any right to reduce that. And third one, man can take resources from nature, but only for satisfying the vital needs. And number 4 is that a decrease in human population is necessary in order to maintain the equilibrium between human and non-human life. And in 5th platform principle, he condemns excessive human interference. And then he asks for the change in policies, political interference, interference from governance is also needed. And the 7th one, he talks about appreciating life quality. We are talking about increasing our standard of living, but he does not say that. He says smallness is great. Okay, he makes a distinction between big and great. So, and finally, he asks us to get down to action. So just talking alone, vision alone is not enough. One has to go to the level of action. So these are the 8 platform principles. And Nace believes that whoever practices these platform principles, they fall in line with the deep ecology movement. And finally, he says that ultimately our Sophia, our wisdom that evolves from this practice may vary from person to person. He is not very strict about that. And now, let me give you a practical example of how deep ecology has been practiced in reality. And it is a very popular example. Before doing that, let me say something about the Ecosofi, or what I have been telling you, the ecological Sophia or wisdom. Okay, so Anne Nace believes that this cycle, there is a vicious cycle happening there. Uh, Production, consumption. So this is a vicious cycle, and man is caught in this. Okay, and it leads only to material wealth. And talking about social justice and all that will not be helpful much, because it leads more and more to environmental crisis. Okay, science is inadequate, social justice is inadequate. So what we need is ecological wisdom. So this can be achieved by living a simple life. So the slogan that Anne Mace developed is simple in means and rich in ends. Okay, so he believes that smallness and slowness are the virtues that we need. And this may sound a little incongruous in the present day world where everything is fast. Okay, but of late, in the past 2 years, I think we have realized, in our heart of hearts, we have realized the virtues of smallness and slowness. Okay, so as I told you, he makes a distinction between ego self, that is the ego which is normally there in man, and he has to transcend this ego in order to realize himself. He has to identify himself with the ecological self. And he says that it can be easily done. So transcendentalism, we have read about that. And it is there in every religious belief. Leave alone religious beliefs, it can be easily done when we are able to show our love and affection towards creatures that are out there in the world. Then we are able to transcend our own self and we are able to identify with them. So that is what he is focusing here. Okay, so as I told you that his ultimate premises or the final Ecosophy, it may vary from person to person. I may believe in something and you may believe in something else, and Nace himself believed in something else. So everything is fine as long as it is based on ecocentric values. So as I told you, these are the basic things that we have to understand about ecological wisdom. And a very practical example that happened in India, something that we have to be very proud about, is the Chipko Moment. And this is a very good example of deep ecology movement. Okay, it happened in the 1970s when the Himalayan mountain ranges were simply a deforestation drive was going on, and all the trees were almost being cut. So in a place called Reni in the Himalayan region, at one point of time, the women decided that they have to do something. So in the year 1974, 27 women, they took this initiative that what they did was they just hugged the trees from behind. The word Chipko means embrace or hug. So they hugged the trees from behind, and you are able to see in the picture, they hugged the trees from behind and they braced themselves to face the axe or the sickle or whatever it is. Okay, so it is a simple means by showing that this tree, this aspect of nature is more important to me than myself. So that is what the women showed. Okay, so as a result of this, all those the tree felling companies, the logging companies, and all those agents, uh, they were shocked. They did not understand. They did not know how to counter this. When the women practically protested, they just stood there in front of the trucks, and some of them were even driven by the trucks. Okay, so all these protests, they resulted in 12,000 square kilometers of watershed being saved. So here also you find that it is a basic non-violent protest because there was no slogan shouting, there was no big names. It is a grassroots movement. Ordinary women, illiterate women, they led this movement. And later on, you find many big names, they joined the movement, but basically it is these women who belong to the land. They drank the water that they had there. They ate the food that they cultivated in their own lands. And they say that it is this that gave them the courage, gave them the spirit to fight against such powerful agents or these money mongers. Okay, so it was actually a Gandhian Satyagraha movement. So you can see the connection between deep ecology and maize, and again, how in India it is practically practiced. Okay, and the slogan of Chipko is that the main products of forests are not timber or resin, but we need soil, water, and oxygen. So this is in total contrast to what is going on now, insisting on cultivation of crops that are economically beneficial. Okay, going for rubber, sugarcane, and such crops which will bring money to the farmers. These women are not talking about them. They're talking only about soil, water, and oxygen. So many trees were prevented from being cut, but this, it has fired the imagination of people all around the world. Wherever you talk about deep ecology, so that is a reference to Chipko Moment. So this is something that we Indians have to be proud about. But in spite of that, you find that the diversity of crops have been lost. Many of the diverse trees, variety of species of trees were cut down, and instead the government insisted on an afforestation drive where they brought in monoculture crops, crops like eucalyptus, crops like teak. They were all replaced, and my focus today on this presentation is how this loss of diversity is a very big loss. Loss of diversity in culture, loss of diversity in nature. Okay, so now this is a practical example. As students of literature, we have to understand how we are going to apply this concept, deep ecology theory, or a concept, you can say, how it can be applied to literature. So I have taken a text, and the text is maybe a lesser known novel, a novel called as A Flight of the Goose, a story of the far north, written by an author called Leslie Thomas. And she is an Alaskan herself, and she herself belongs to the indigenous community. And so the novel is a very good example of an environmental text. And I don't know why it's not as popular as Hungry Tide or any other environmental text. So here you have this novel. The story happens in Alaska, Arctic region, the tundra in transition. So Leslie Thomas writes about how this, when the story happens. The story happens at a time when before outsiders came on bended knee to learn from us, she says. Outsiders came, but it was to change us. So the book takes us back to Barry Lopez and her book called Arctic Dreams that was published in 1986, whereas Leslie Thomas's book was published in somewhere in, I think it was 2005. So Barry Lopez also talks about the Arctic region. So we always think that there is nothing there, but there is so much there in the Arctic. So much of life is there in Arctic. Okay, and Barry Lopez makes the reader understand how it is very difficult to understand the Arctic. That was the aim of Barry Lopez. So that was a non-fiction text, whereas Leslie Thomas is a novel, and she focuses on the love life of an American ornithologist and a native shaman. Okay, so now what I'm trying to do is to align the basic principles that we saw in deep ecology to this text that I have taken to show how eco-criticism can be put into practice. Okay, so the first deep ecology principle that we saw earlier, it is the same. The flourishing of human and non-human life on Earth have value in themselves. You can call them as intrinsic value or inherent value. Okay, and these values are independent of the usefulness of a non-human world for human purposes. So the meaning is that every creature has got an intrinsic worth and it has a right to exist in this world. So how does Leslie Thomas put across this message? So the creature that is in focus, the species that is in focus in this novel is a kind of a geese called as, Canada is very famous for its geese population. So a variety of geese called as the Talon's geese. The Talon's geese may be an imaginary name, but it is very close to the Canada geese or the other species that you find in the Alaskan range. Okay, so here the hero is himself a ornithologist. So when you have a bird watcher, he's very much obsessed with birds and he is a committed scientist. Okay, and his job is to find out how much of population exists in the wild, because this particular species is in the brink of being extinct. It is actually marked as endangered. And he waits in this particular place because it is the time when these geese are supposed to arrive, but they have not come there. So he wonders what has gone wrong. He thinks that it is the California wintering area that is the problem, that is turned into parking lots. And he says how these birds are very sensitive to ecological imbalances. Okay, even a mild disturbance to the nest, they will abandon the nest. So that is the creature, and that is the commitment of the ornithologist. He always talks about geese, he dreams about geese. And even though his job is there to count the goose poops so that he can measure the number that is available there. Counting is very important for ornithologists. He's doing that, and but he is able to understand the entire scenario in a wider perspective. Okay, how everything is interconnected. So by focusing on this particular species, and the author Leslie Thomas makes us understand that conservation is the message. And the second deep ecology principle is richness and diversity of life forms. And as I told you already, I think you are able to see in the backdrop, we feel that this place, the Arctic region and the Antarctic region, they don't have any life forms living there, but it is not so. It is not empty. It is populated. It is heavily populated. Okay, so there is richness and diversity of life forms, and we have to realize that these are values. These are values in themselves. Okay, so the tundra diversity is listed. There is actually a huge catalog of all the creatures that live in the novel. Okay, so Gilnave is the name of the place. It lies beneath the flyway, and there is a head-spinning parade of diversity on Earth. This is how the author talks about the tundra diversity. A variety of birds. If you take the geese, there are a variety of geese, and there are so many other, the sandpiper, there are so many other birds that are listed in the novel. And if you look at the plants, you think that no plants grow here, but there are plants. Plants take a very long time to grow. For example, the birch may take maybe 100 years, and it may have grown only 2 inches or so. So that, but still vegetation exists in this particular place. And if you look at the animals, there are so many animals in the area, and small animals like porcupines, hawks, wolverines, wolves, and bigger animals like the polar bear and the sea walruses and the whales. They all live here. And the whole novel catalogs all these creatures. So by doing that, I am able to see that the novel can be aligned to the second deep ecology principle. And the third deep ecology principle says that man does not have any right to reduce this richness and diversity except to satisfy vital human needs. So we have to understand the distinction between the native population of the tundra and the modern people who have come to this region. Okay, so the native people who are living in tundra, they are hunter-gatherers. They cannot grow, they cannot cultivate the land. You can see the land is uncultivable. Okay, so they believe, so they depend on what they hunt. But these hunter-gatherers, they practice so many, their ecological wisdom is something that is admirable. Okay, they have a native wisdom. So they hunt only for their needs. And whatever they hunt, they do not waste. Everything is used up. Okay, and this is in total contrast to the game hunters. For example, these native people may at times hunt the geese also, because at times when they are not able to find animals, they may hunt the geese also. But they don't do this hunting during the nesting season. They don't take away the eggs also. They follow all these principles. This is a native wisdom which they have inherited through generations. Whereas the modern people, they come there as game hunters. They just land on aeroplanes and they take the rifles and they just shoot the animals. Sometimes they bring the children also, and the children are giving a rifle in their hands and they just take away polar bears, just like that, and they become Christmas gifts. Okay, and looking at these people, the modern people and their ways of life, these native indigenous people also undergo changes in the temperament, which is something very shocking. Okay, and there is a character called Billy in the novel, who says that there is nothing wrong in killing these animals and they're just animals. So they try to, what follows is a blame game. Okay, the indigenous people blame the scientists, because the scientists, they believe in tagging the animals so that they can follow them, and they go to the nests in order to count. So the native people blame the scientists, and the scientists blame the native people, and the game hunters are also blamed. So there is a blame game going on, but who actually suffers the consequence? It is these creatures, okay, who suffer the consequence. So that is the third deep ecology principle. And the fourth one is quite important to what I'm trying to talk here. Here in the fourth principle, Leslie Thomas talks about, Anne Nace talks about the flourishing of human life and cultures is compatible with the substantial decrease of human population. The flourishing of non-human life requires such a decrease. This is the fourth deep ecology principle. Okay, so here it is not only nature that has to flourish, but culture also has to flourish. Okay, so human life and culture, the word culture is present. So Anne Nace believes in this. Okay, the combination of nature and culture, they are not two different opposites. They are not binaries, but they are two sides of the same coin, and they have to come together. So that is what we have to understand. So here, this novel portrays the way of life, the Eskimos, the cultures of the Eskimos. Okay, the people who live in the Arctic regions, we can call them as the Eskimos or the Inuits. Okay, they live in their houses are called as igloos or inis. Ini is a native language. You can see that there. So it is actually, they live underground because they cannot live above the surface of the land. So it is like a womb of the earth. They call that as the ini is the womb of the earth. Okay, so they live underground. And the novel presents the way of their way of life, how they hunt animals, and how they go for fishing, and how they use the skin of the animals, and how during summer seasons, how they go out and how they live outdoors, and how they play games, how they have their own rituals, how they pray. Everything is detailed in the novel. Okay, and as I already pointed out, their hunting methods are totally different. They know that they have to hunt the creature, but they do it with reverence. They do not waste. And when the animal is hunted, they say a prayer so that the soul is satisfied. And they believe when they say the prayer, the animal is satisfied and the soul comes back to them again and again. And they even sing a hymn or two at the dying moments of the animal, and they give it water. So they do not, they, for them wasting is a sin. So whether they hunt the animals or whether they collect the small grass that is grown, they should not waste it. If they collect the grass, they have to eat it. Otherwise, it will be wilt. It will get wilted. Okay, so to waste even the green plants might make them hide from you next time. One elderly character called Flo talks about. So we understand how they have the native wisdom. So they don't waste. They give importance to the souls of the creatures, because we are coming later on to that. They believe in shamanism. Okay, so now in the novel, we understand how there is a loss of this Inuit culture. First of all, the place itself is something ancient. All those the lands, the rivers, they have existed from time immemorial, and they have been given names thousands of years ago. And actually, Leslie Thomas points out how there is an irony when the white man says that he was the first one to have landed, set his foot on a particular place, because the native people have already been living there. And to call a place as remote or to call a place as wilderness is something wrong, Leslie Thomas says. And she says, she very funnily points out that it is places like Seattle and New York that are remote. And this is very similar to Edward Abbey when he says in Desert Solitaire, he lives in the deserts of Utah and he feels very comfortable there. And he says it is only for people who live in the cities that is crazy or that is madness. Living in Ohio is madness. For him, living in the desert is natural. In the same way, these people feel very comfortable or at home. And so she chides at the European population, which comes to the native land in order to change them. So the first quotation that we saw about Leslie Thomas, they came on bended knees and they came here to change us. So that is what. So every region, every inlet has got a history. And now how that changes because of the church, it changes because of the baptism, the Baptist missionaries, the Christian missionaries, and who wanted a monoculture. Okay, so this loss of diverse culture is a very big loss, and Christianity has to take the blame for that. Okay, not only here, in different parts of the world. And the second big culprit is the schools. The schools wanted again the children to speak only the language that they taught them. When they spoke the native languages, they were actually beaten. And every native speaker was made to feel ashamed about speaking his own language. So as a result, school. And the third one is the TV. Even if you don't watch it, you cannot avoid its penetration into your lives. So these are the three things. So Leslie Thomas says how the children were kidnapped to the boarding schools and whipped them, and the children were whipped for speaking their own language. And the next is modernization. Modernization comes in the form of ships. Ships arrive to the Alaskan region. They bring a lot of things that they need: petrol, diesel, prefabricated house, all the essential things. But even then, the very presence of the ship is incongruous to this particular place. And so it is still evil, Leslie Thomas says. Okay, so now I have tried to point out how slowly the culture has eroded, and through the character of a person called Willie, who has changed from an original indigenous man to a modern game hunter. Okay, so Leslie Thomas shows how this change has taken place and how pathetic the situation is. Okay, now we come to the second part of this particular deep ecology principle, which says that there should be a reduction in non-human life also. There has been a criticism on deep ecology, especially for this, because it asks for reducing human population. Okay, and there was a radical movement called as Earth First, and it took this idea of deep ecology, and they were Dave Foreman was the founder of this movement called as Earth First, and it developed in 1980s and 1980s and 90s in the US. And Earth First targeted machines because it wanted to save the Earth from machines. So what they did was they took to terrorism, they took to violent means, they targeted the machines, They destroyed the machines. So that was their way of protecting the environment. But it became illegal activities, it became criminal activities. Okay, so we have to understand that deep ecology is not anti-human, and it is human because it says that it gives equal importance both to human life and non-human life. But somewhere we have to strike a balance. There should be place for the other creatures also to live. So in Leslie Thomas, in this novel, Flight of the Goose, she makes this statement. Okay, she says the focus is on birds, so she says that the balance is needed. Okay, where in a place where there are resources, there will be obviously a contest between human and the non-human life forms. So here also there is a contest. So she says for peace and harmony, there has to be low population both the sides, and you can't feel outnumbered. She says. So she through this statement, I understand that Leslie Thomas aligns herself to this deep ecology principle also. Okay, now the fifth deep ecology principle talks about excessive human interference with the non-human world, and how every day it's worsening. All of us have to agree to this. Okay, and especially in a region called as the tundra, which is covered with ice. What is happening here is oil drilling. Oil drilling is happening in different parts of the world, and drilling for fossil fuels is happening, and it changes the ecosystem because all these areas are ecologically fragile areas. So when man with his interference brings in his machines and does all these reconstructions, the consequences are for us to see. Okay, we have we have landslides happening, we have cloud bursts happening in different parts of the world, we have floods happening, and all these are unseasonal, and they are happening at a very rapid rate. What you call as anthropogenic climate change is happening in different parts of the world, and we cannot deny that. So here in this novel, oil drilling is taken up. Okay, big oil has to plunder the loveliest and the most delicate regions on this planet. So the place is so beautiful, fully covered with permafrost, and you see to see an oil drilling machine there itself is something incongruous. It looks so out of place in the midst of the white snow, in the midst of the green grass that has grown there. Okay, so that is highlighted in many parts of the novel. And Leaf, the ornithologist, is trying to point out what are the consequences of oil drilling. One major danger is oil spills. If the oil spills happen, then that is the final stage, okay, in extinction. So oil drilling as such increases the temperature levels, which leads to the melting of the permafrost. Only if the permafrost is there, anything can walk, or people can even drive on the snow. So once that starts melting, the whole island, the whole area will become a bog, and everything will sink into it. So melting of the permafrost is one big danger. An oil spill, when it happens, it spreads everywhere, and it reaches the delta where it is the breeding ground of the birds, and animals like fox and birds, they won't have anything to eat. But before that, the toxins will get them. Okay, and the seismic activities that are happening because of oil drilling will also affect the whale population and its migration. So all these are pointed out. And if you look at reality, there are 300 to 500 oil spills that are happening every year all around the world. And as we all know, oil spreads so fast. Okay, in just 1 second, half football ground area is covered, and it takes decades to undo the damage. It cannot be done at all because the consequences are far-reaching, and we cannot do anything about it. So that is what is happening in reality also. Okay, so oil spills are very, very dangerous, and the novel talks about that. So Leslie Thomas makes a philosophical ruling at times. She says that science has not understood the cyclical fluctuations in the Arctic region. And by introducing the idea of oil drilling, how she says man has plundered and interfered into the natural ecosystems. And the point is that when um, a, ecologist or any scientist predicts that something bad is going to happen, they're not taken seriously. Many writers have talked about that. I have read so many books where the scientists are characters. Whenever a scientist makes a prediction, it is not taken seriously. So Leif also makes a prediction. The ornithologist makes a prediction here, and the disasters are predicted, and they are just taken as cornucopian exaggerations. Okay, so he says that nobody down south wanted to believe it. It sounded like Eskimo legends when people are punished for evil. So the fact is that uh, Leslie Thomas uses the opportunity to talk about scientists and their pathetic plights. Okay, it is not only the common man who's not ready to believe, even scientists are not ready to believe. The establishment is not ready to believe what they say. Okay, so for Leaf, he doesn't know whether his grant will be continued, whether his project will be continued, whether he can continue his research. And everybody makes fun of him. On the one hand, the native people make fun of him because they say that he goes to the nests of the birds and counts them, thereby disturbing them. And he attacks the reindeers. So they make fun of him. On the other hand, the establishment, the government, the scientist establishment, they don't believe in him. So he says that there are two kinds of science. One science that makes money, for example, those who make nuclear bombs, they make money for the government, whereas scientists like him and ecologists like him, they do not make money. So he calls himself as an antichrist. There is a tinge of humor everywhere throughout the novel, and so it is one example of that. And Leslie Thomas also talks about war and its effects on the environment. She talks about the Vietnam War and how, because of the bombs that were dropped, the forests have become poisonous. Okay, so she quotes even from Thomas Hardy, and who says that what we gain from science is after all sadness. And so there is one more quote: our middling intellect misshapes the beauteous forms and we murder to dissect. So these quotes show how the interference is excessive, and somewhere we have to draw the line. And the sixth and seventh deep ecology principles talk about how man, how these change in policies are needed, economic policies, political policies. So something has to be done. Okay, so so that we always talk about increasing our standard of living. Our aim should not be that. Our aim should be appreciating the quality of life that we have. Okay, Inuits, these people, they were living their lives in tune with nature. But as times pass by, they're also taken by this buy, acquire syndrome. Okay, so they also become like anybody else. And when somebody is not able to manage that, he becomes one among the mainstream, becoming beggars and forgetting their roots and lost in the multitude. Okay, so cultural genocide is not too strong a name for what has happened, she says. Okay, so is it possible to go back to the original pristine state? Is a question that Leslie Thomas asks, and she also indirectly gives an answer. Okay, and as I already told you, the final platform principle talks about action. And now, having aligned all these principles to the novel that I have chosen, now what kind of ecosophy or ecological wisdom that Leslie Thomas arrives at is the next question that we have to ask. Here, as I already told you, for Anne Nace, it was Ecosofi T. T stands for the Travagaston cabin, the mountain where he lived, from where he derived this concept of ecosophy. Okay, so for him, extension of the ecological self and identifying oneself with the outer world. Okay, so here, how that happens in this novel. It happens in a matter of fact manner because people of the Inuit community, their native religion is shamanism. Okay, they are basically animistic. It is an animistic religion, by which we mean that they believe that every human, non-human, non-living things have souls in them. So every animal, small or big, has got a soul, and every non-living creature, every mountain, every river, every small inlet has got a soul. So this is basically animism. Okay, so all creatures, mountains, wind, sea, ice, are believed to have souls. So basically, you have to, just as you have a soul, all these creatures or the non-living things also have souls. So automatically, you have to respect them. So there is some kind of a telepathic conversation that happens between the non-human, the human, and the non-human plane. Okay, and in the novel, you have the animals are also looked upon as people with intelligence, sensitivities, and passions. So this kind of animism or shamanism can be related to Warwick Fox and his theory called as transpersonal ecology, where he also talks about this transcending the self and identifying oneself with the other creatures. Cosmological or transpersonal identification with nature happens in Warwick Fox, and it happens to Nace and indirectly to Leslie Thomas also. Okay, so here you have a scientist who's the central character of the novel, and how will he believe in this kind of an ancient, or sometimes you can call that as a superstitious belief as animism. Okay, so you have a kind of a conflict happening in the novel where Leaf, the ornithologist, the scientist, slowly comes to believe in this animistic traditions, whereas the heroine, who is a shaman, who is brought up in this animistic tradition, slowly losing her animistic beliefs. So that is the ironic thing that happens in the novel. So Leaf himself believes that the psychic abilities of the birds and other animals, as well as human and thought transference that happens. And I'll give you some examples. The novel itself cites some examples. Okay, you have pack wolves hunting a prey, and how do they plan? How do they plan and how they attack the prey in unison? That is one. And how does the prey understand that it is being stalked? That is number two. And how do, if you look at flight of birds, especially starlings, thousands of starlings will turn as if they are one single bird at a time. How does that happen? And you have this picture here where you see a V formation of birds. How do they form? How do they fly in this V formation without being able to see that? It is actually one of the wonders of nature. This V formation is actually the one of the wonders of nature, and it has got many scientific theories behind that. You see two birds flying at two corners, and they actually bear the most load. Okay, they have to fly against the wind, resistance of the wind, and each bird flies at a slightly higher altitude than the other. The one at the two corners, they take the maximum resistance from the wind, and they take turns. The birds, whenever they become tired, they take turns and they go to the lead. They take the lead positions. So, the V formation also helps them to interact with one another, communicate with one another. So, V formation of birds is actually one of the wonders, and you find in group dynamics and group work, teamwork. This is cited as an example, the best example. So, through all these things, we are able to wonder whether these animals, these things are able to think it through. So, here in shamanism, they believe that each creature can think. Each creature, a living or non-living thing, can think. Okay, so that is the animism religion that they follow. Okay, so another basic principle is that you have to be humble. You should not be greedy. And here, the heroine, her name is Gretchen, or you have this Koituk, or the native name, and she is able to identify herself with the red fox. The red fox is the spirit, okay, and she is able to call it when needed. Okay, so here, what I'm trying to say is this native religion of the native culture of the Inuits. They believe in shamanism, and it is animistic in nature, and where the transference or the transcendence of one soul to another happens automatically in a matter of fact manner. Okay, because it is ingrained in them. Okay, so that is what I want to say. Then when the novel comes to a close, Okay, so this place, the Alaskan tundra, is under a multi-pronged attack. On the one hand, nature is destroyed, and the other hand, culture is destroyed, land is destroyed. So this is a multi-pronged attack that happens in reality as well as in the novel. Okay, so it is the loss of critical species, populations, and that perform necessary biological functions, and it is a loss of multitudes of other values. It's Drenson who has spoken these words. He's a very important critic in anime studies. So he has said this. Okay, so now extending this study a little further, I'm taking you to one other text also. So before doing that, let us talk about this text, how this comes to an end. Okay, so what does Leslie Thomas, what does she offer for the future of this land, this tundra region? Okay, is it possible to stop and go back to the pristine times? She thinks that it is not possible. Practically, it is not possible. So we are heading headstrong towards the crash. So there is an apocalypse happening in the novel where everything is destroyed. And then there is a ascendancy to a pure state, an original state, the state of the ancient times. Okay, so there is flooding, which is very typical of any apocalyptic narrative, and there is a description of all that. And what will happen to the indigenous and coastal people, to the species of the earth? So this question took me to another text, a very recent text, and that is The Nutmeg's Curse, Parables for a Planet in Crisis, written by Amitabh Ghosh, which was published a few months back. It came to India in October 2021. I'm just citing a few examples from Amitabh Ghosh before I conclude my lecture. And I'm trying to show how Amitabh Ghosh also mourns the loss of diversity, cultures, diversity in nature. And before doing that, let us understand the change in Amitabh Ghosh's interest. He has a degree in anthropology. Okay, he's an anthropologist, we know. And initially, his writings were had more leaning towards anthropology, but of late, his leanings are towards environmentalism. Ever since he published Hungry Tide, then The Great Derangement, and now The Nutmeg's Curse, Parables for a Planet in Crisis. So here he talks about a few parables, and I'm citing one or two examples from the text. And the parable one is the parable of nutmeg and mace. These are two things that are very familiar. We are very familiar with. So originally, these two things, the nutmeg and the mace is actually the outer shavings of the nutmeg. So they used to grow in a place called Banda, the small islands that you find in the Indian Ocean, the northeast corner of the Indian Ocean. They are just dots in the map. They are so small. Okay, and there is a volcano in those days, and he's talking about Banda Islands in the 17th century. There was an active volcano, the Fire Mountain, that's called as the Fire Mountain. And whenever this combination of the presence of the volcano and the ashes of the volcano and the ecosystem, the atmosphere, the weather there, it created a unique forest which is full of wonder, which is full of strange kinds of plants. And one among them is the nutmeg. And this nutmeg was discovered in the 17th century, and it was known for its culinary and medicinal properties. And the Banda people, they thought actually it is their land, so they were living there, and they were using these spices, that is nutmeg and the mace. And the nutmeg slowly traveled. The nutmeg tree did not travel, but the nutmeg traveled to different lands. And the
Ma'am, can you please unmute yourself? You went on mute, and the screen also it's not shared anymore, ma'am. Can you reshare the screen?
yeah, okay, sure. Okay, how do I do that?
Once again, share screen, ma'am.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah, is it okay now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. So these Banda Islands, the Dutch people came. The first invaders were the Dutch, and they wanted to obliterate the native people, the Banda people. So simply they were driven out, and whoever resisted were killed. Okay, they brought Japanese mercenaries for doing the killing. And then slowly East India Company came, and they because the spices are so valuable in those days. Amitav Ghosh says that with a handful of nutmeg, you could buy a house or even a ship. Okay, so the infighting of the Bandanese was taken to advantage. Okay, so a native population is here obliterated, simply wiped off for the sake of again money. Okay, and the second example given by Amitav Ghosh is in America. In America also you have native Indians, and okay, and in a place they're called as the Navajo tribes, and these Navajo tribes, they also lived in a place where three mountains rise, and they were driven out. They were driven out, and they were driven out to places of Mexico, because when the white colonies and the settlers came, they were driven out of the place. Okay, so Amitav Ghosh goes on to talk about that. And something very shocking also we see there. We talk about bioweapons and bio war. Are you able to see the change in my slide?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So they
You can just click on next. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so he talks about the Navajo tribes, how now we are talking about biowars and bioweapon, how the pandemic is used as a weapon. But there in the 18th century, in the 19th century, smallpox pathogens were used as weapons. Okay, so whenever the white men came to these lands, they wanted to drive out these native people. They used to give them a gift of a blanket or a handkerchief that was infested with this pathogens, smallpox pathogens, or they used to drive them into camps where the disease was multiplying, and they died naturally. Okay, and the disease skyrocketed and they died. They did not give them any treatment. So this was another way in which the native people were driven out, killed, and the land was molded. Terraforming is the method that they used to change the entire landscape. Okay, so now what is happening in the 21st century? The same native people are targeted in places like Nevada, where they are the native, the nuclear testing sites for, so the air is filled with nuclear waste. And Leslie Marmon Silko, the native writer, talks about this. So many writers have talked about this. I'm giving the example of Leslie Marmon Silko, the Laguna writer. The Talker Sledge is the memoir that she has written. Okay, so now in the COVID situation, in the pandemic situation also, there is the discrepancy. Okay, in Alabama, the death rate where the native people live are much higher than the other places in America. Okay, and another place where such discrepancy, where the decimation of culture and nature happens, is the Amazon basin. In Brazil, the Yanomami tribe, they were also systematically wiped out of the place. They are also having shaman beliefs, and their rituals were also replaced. And you see that the Brazilian rainforest is wiped off on the one hand, and the indigenous people are also wiped off on the other hand. And with regard to COVID, these are statistics given by Amitav Ghosh himself. He says that the mortality rate among the native population is 9.7, whereas the general population is at just 5.7. So the rainforest in this region is also at a tipping point. Now, we should not say, talking about Banda, talking about America, what about India? Are we not guilty? Yes, we are also guilty. Okay, we are also guilty. We have to look at the Northeast India, which is considered as an anthropological paradise. 500 ethnic groups are present here. And when the British colonizers landed here, they divided the lands into highlands and lowlands. So this resulted in a kind of an enmity between the different tribes. Okay, so the original religion is the Naga religion. Okay, they were also replaced. Again, Baptist missionaries arrived here. Original Naga religion is a combination of animism, supernatural beliefs, okay, theism. Everything was there, but it was replaced. Okay, replaced by Christianity. You have so many churches that are in Nagaland, and most of the population is now Christian, but originally it was their own native religions. Okay, so head hunting was a part of their life. Drum making was a part of their life. Okay, so now there is an onslaught on the community, on the land. On the land, the government is looking for again oil rigging, and then hydrocarbon resources are depleted. Okay, so actually India, we have two models of colonialism. One is the settler colonies and the other one is the non-settler colonies. India comes under non-settler colonies, but with these practices, we are converting India is also into a settler colony, whereas the Indians are turned against Indians. So that is what happens in the post-colonial scenario. So when Amitav Ghosh talks about all this, he clearly distinguishes what makes an indigenous man and what makes an European conqueror. For the indigenous people, the past lies embedded in features of the earth: canyons, lakes, mountains, and rocks. Okay, and the indigenous man endows his land with multiple significances. This significance reaches into his life and it shapes his life. It shapes the way he thinks. So it is a part of his life. Okay, the landscape is a part of his life. Whereas for European, this is something that the land is something that he has to subdue and conquer. He looks upon nature just as a repository of resources. So he has to grab these resources from those who are having it. Okay, the land has to be improved, the people have to be improved so that he can conquer everything. So this is the basic difference, and only because of this, the planet is in crisis. Now, I'm giving you one or two examples from popular narratives. One is Avatar, the epic science fiction of James Cameron. The story happens in 22nd century. Even then, the same story is repeated. So Earth's natural sources are all depleted at that point of time. So man goes to a new planet called as Pandora, and he tries to colonize there. And there you have a valuable mineral, just like our nutmeg. Okay, so here also you have something called as unobtainium, and the conflict that arises between the local Navi tribe who worship the mother goddess Eva and the modern man. Okay, so that is one example. The second example is
Ma'am, please unmute, ma'am. Once again, we have lost you.
yeah. Is it okay now?
Yes, ma'am, but you will have to share your screen, ma'am.
Yes, sure. I'm coming to the end of my presentation, where in the last but one slide, I'm talking about this narrative, the recently released movie called as Dune. The story happens in 10,191, where all the planets are colonized. So you have a planet called Arrakis, and it is a desert planet. And there also you have a valuable element called as a spice, and there is a conflict between the native population, freemen, and contenders. So whether it is 17th century, or whether it is 15th century, or whether it is 22nd century, or sometime in 10,191, the story happens to be the same. So as we conclude, what I'm trying to tell here is Industrialism is a monoculture that destroys both cultural and biological diversity. And cultural and biological diversity are two things that are very essential. It is critical to our survival and our flourishing. So we have to look for or support diversity in nature, culture, and as students of literature, we have to support indigenous voices, voices like that of Edric. You see her here. She belongs to the Chippewa tribe, Native American Indian, and our own Hansda Shavendra Shekhar, who is from Jharkhand, and his Adivasi will not dance is a very famous narrative. So with these concluding remarks, I end my lecture. Thank you very much for the patient listening. Thank you.
Ma'am, thank you so much. Within a short span of time, you were able to cover so much information, ma'am. Also, thank you for the number of examples that you gave. We have a few questions, ma'am.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Miss Nissi.
Yes.
She wants to know, does religion fall under deep ecology or shallow ecology? Religion being a product of culture and also being accused of its anthropocentricity, can the greening of religion be a viable solution to the current ecological crisis? If so, how?
Yeah. Yes, religion undoubtedly falls under deep ecology because it molds the consciousness. It is not a concept. It is different from the solutions that are offered by science. Okay, but when we are talking about religion, we are treading into sensitive areas. It is very personal. Every religion is for every practitioner of every religion. That is very respectable. Okay, so we cannot make generalized or sweeping comments or sweeping statements. Whatever comments that I made here are taken from the text that I wanted to show about. I wanted to expose. So they are not my personal views. Every religion has to, or they are already in the process of greening. Many of the ancient religions are green by nature. Many of the ancient traditions are nature loving, and there is no distinction between God and nature. There are many ancient traditions like that. And some of the other religions have understood the importance and the power of religion, so they are also going green. And yes, it may not be a simple process because everything ultimately lies in man's temperament, uh, in the practitioner of every religion. I think I have answered the question.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. We have a question from Krishnanand. He wants to know the similarities and differences between Indian and Western approaches to ecosystem.
Yeah. Indian and Western approaches to ecosystem would have been different, were different. Maybe hundreds, maybe 100 of years ago, there would have been distinctions. But now you see that they are the same. Just as our lifestyles have changed, we in our food habits, we in our lifestyles, the way we dress, the way we look at life, relationships, institutions like marriage, family, everything has changed. And the way we look at nature also has changed. And with the onslaught of European invaders, and the way they have made every native person feel ashamed of his own language or feel ashamed of his own culture and tradition, automatically great leveling has taken place. And we are speaking against this leveling only. We have to encourage diversity and not monoculture or not leveling.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. We have one more question. This is from Arun Kumar. He wants to know how we can analyze dystopian narratives from an eco-critical perspective.
Yeah, dystopia is a trope that we have. We have many tropes in eco-critical environmental narratives. So dystopia is one. Okay, and by presenting scenarios which are scary, okay, which are very scary. Even here in this novel, Flight of the Goose, there is a scary scenario where the whole place is covered with oil, where there are floods. Dystopian narratives try to shock the reader into reality. This is what a writer can do. A writer cannot offer solutions. It is not that simple. And there is no one solution for the problems that we face today. So what the writer can do is through by presenting a dystopian scenario, the author can shock the reader to reality, to create some kind of an awareness so that he believes in the ripple effect that this awareness would create. I think I have answered the question.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. So we come to the end of Q&A. Thank you, Sumati, ma'am, for your patience.
Thank
with
you,
so
Mark.
much clarity.
I hope we are in tune with the time. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am. Perfectly, ma'am. We are keeping time. I would now like to call upon Ms. Karen Venita, Assistant Professor from the Department of English, to deliver the vote of thanks for this session.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, ma'am. Thank you so much for this engaging lecture on the paramount topic of deep ecology, ma'am. You've given us so much clarity on the difference between deep ecology and shallow ecology. And you've given us a very detailed explanation of the platform principles of Ecosofi with the cardinal text, Flight of the Goose. So the current environmental situation is a wake-up call for the whole of humanity. And we understand that individual action is critical for meaningful change. So today's lecture, we have a lot of takeaways from you. And you emphasized on the need to transcend our ego and how humility is very important, and how to perceive nature as a part of us, to realize the intrinsic value of every creature and entity in nature, and above all, to appreciate life quality. So thank you, ma'am. You've highlighted the scope of research in deep ecology and Ecosofi, and also the need to nurture environmental consciousness, which I think is the need of the hour, and to support indigenous voices. So it was indeed a very fruitful session, ma'am. Thank you so much for your presence today. Thank you.
Thank you. I wish to thank the department, the management, the head of the department, and Dr. Madangi, the coordinator, for having given me this opportunity. And I think this will be of a little help, at least, to the scholars who will be working under the professors who are attending this program. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm here to propose the vote of thanks, closing note rather, for the faculty development program, ma'am.
Yes.
So, good evening, all of you. We have come to the end of a highly resourceful and productive week, and I wholeheartedly thank each and every individual who has helped in the successful conduct of the event. My hearty thanks to the management, the principal, and the secretary of the college for providing us this platform. My thanks to Dr. Mrs. Padmavati, Dean, Academic Support and Alumni Relations, and former head of the Department of English, for lending us her sustained support. Thank you, ma'am. My thanks to Dr. Sushil Mary Matthews, head Department of English. In my introductory remarks, I had mentioned how ma'am paved the way for the conduct of the FDP. Thank you, ma'am. And thanks also for the complete freedom that you gave me while organizing this FDP. I take it as the sign of trust that you have in me. My thanks to all the speakers of this 7-day program, starting from Dr. Rufus, Dr. Marx, Dr. Ganesh, Dr. Vinod Balakrishnan, Dr. Joseph Dureraj, Professor Daniel David, and Dr. Sumati. And ma'am, yes, I'm sure all the professors here would have been greatly benefited by this lecture, and I'm sure they will take it back to their students. Thank you, ma'am, ever so much. Unique and outstanding in their own way, All these professors, I would like to call them literary giants, have made a strong impression and have given us a perspective on the topics that they have chosen to explore. They are deep as well as wide learning. They are analytical and perfectly ratioinative mind, combined with their sapience that comes from long experience of being educators, have immensely benefited all of us. I thank each and every one of them for their participation and contribution. My thanks to all my colleagues of the Department of English, PSGR Krishnamal College for Women, for helping me out throughout. My thanks to Ms. Kavya, research scholar from the department who has been aiding me right from the beginning. You must have seen her moderating some of the sessions. She is the technocrat of the department and is primarily responsible for the conduct of this FDP with almost nil snags and pitfalls. Thank you, Kavya. My thanks to the department student secretary, Rebecca Elsa Jess, for her promptness in helping me. Most of all, I would like to thank you participants for your enthusiastic and sustained response. Our role as teachers in this society is irreplaceable. Any kind of a quantum development in science or technology cannot negate our role. Each of us can leave behind a lasting influence. The speakers of the FDP are a visible testimony to this statement. The Tamil grammar book Nannul, written in the 13th century, talks about the qualities of a good teacher. Kulanarul Devam Kolgai Mainmai, Kalaipayil Telivu Katturai Vanmai, Nilamalai Niraikol Malar Nigar Machiyum, Ulagiyal Arivodu Uyargunam Inayavum, Amaibavan Nulurai Asiriyanni. That is, amidst, it lists all the qualities of a good teacher. And amidst other qualities, this passage, this stanza goes on to say that a teacher must read voraciously, widely, and be willing to disseminate the knowledge that he or she gains. He should share it with others. My only prayers are that each of us are bitten by this literary bug that induces in us the thirst for knowledge. May we in turn spread such scholarship amongst our students, hoping that they will carry on this legacy like a relay race. If this FDP had directed you towards this direction, even to a minuscule level, then we consider it the greatest success of all. My best wishes to all of you. Thank you yet again. Participants, kindly stay back for other instructions. Sumati ma'am, thank you so much, ma'am.
Yes, Madhavi, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Can I leave the meeting now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Take care, ma'am. Until
you.
we meet again. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, dear participants. So the feedback link will be made available in a few moments. So today, the feedback link will also extend to the test link. And this link, it will be available here in the chat box, and it will also be posted in the description box of the YouTube video. It will remain alive for 2 hours where you can fill it. So there are some things that you ought to remember. That is, when you click open the link, initially you will have to fill in your name, your department, the name of the college, and your designation as usual. But remember, please fill it correctly without any errors. Over the course of the past week, we have received some feedback. It contains errors in all these categories. So today's link will be particularly taken into account for your certificate. So whatever spelling that you type will be carried on to the certificate. So please be very, very careful. Patiently type your name and all the other details, and then you can proceed to the test. So as I told you, this link, it will stay open for 2 hours. Before that, you can finish and submit your test link, and you will receive your certificates shortly. Mostly we will try to process it at the earliest, but just in case there is a delay, kindly bear with us. we will check all the attendance and the feedback that you have posted over the past week along with your test, and we will give you a certificate. So kindly bear with us. So once again, my best wishes go with all of you. Good luck. May the odds be in our